Hello, lovely people. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Rubbing Elbows. I am Karin Wolok, and I'll let my brother introduce himself.
Yariv, Wolok. It's been a while since we've done one of these. I think probably a month already, right? Since allhiphop.com. But
we were like on a roll for a little bit. We were like doing a bunch of episodes, and then we like just stopped.
Well, going to Israel has a way of disrupting. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
schedule.
It definitely changed it because then you're like trying to match time zones. Like right now in Israel, it is 9:15 p.m. I'm still in Israel. Yariv is back in the U.S.
Yep.
Chad's also our guest today, Chad Stender. I just mixed your name up with itself. I'll just introduce Chad.
Well, why don't you introduce Chad at this point?
That was like accidental. I'm like, well, I was gonna say where Chad is. He's like in Philadelphia right now. It's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Very different experiences. But welcome, Chad. Chad is partner at 76 Capital. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here, Karin. It's so good to see you. It's been a long time. We've known each other for many years now, and Yariv, it's a pleasure as well. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm surprised you guys don't know each other actually yet, but
well, I did notice doing a little bit of research on you. I did notice that we have somebody in common, that's somebody that I've known for a long time, actually, that you do partner with outside of
sister.
You. Outside of you.
You've known me longer, though.
That is true. I have known you longer. That is true. You win.
That's true. But yeah, Chad. So I mean, for those listening too, I mean, I'm sure some people have probably watched some of these episodes, but it's usually just kind of actually the original idea was just to cover the stories of networking and how you got to where you're going and like building relationships, all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of taken a form of its own. So we're just going to let it ride out and see where we get. And maybe there will be some interesting discoveries and people can learn some cool stuff.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I think we could kind of maybe start off at is I have an idea of how we met. I think I know where we met. And I'm interested in seeing if our stories match. Do you remember where we met?
This is always interesting.
Oh, here we go. It's pretty easy to boil it down, right? We're connected through either the Philly business networking and or Jewish Philly business networking. But I think Wayne initially brought everyone together. So the ultimate networker. I'm gonna have to go credit to Wayne. It only makes sense for the story that's the tie-in. So what's your side here?
Okay, I remember it. So obviously Chad does not remember the first time we met. This is always great. We have like completely opposite stories. No one remembers where we met. I always thought I was the only one who never remembered it. So we actually made it the candidate offices.
Okay.
I think you guys had come by there together. And that's where we initially met.
All right. You just put a little more context.
Not really Jewish Philly, but yeah, it's kind of. I like that you put the context there, though. Like that's where you thought we might have met.
So not like JBN, but So
yeah.
One of those two circles, we had it covered.
Yeah, definitely. So I think maybe we can kind of start from the beginning because, one of the things that's really cool about like doing these like podcasts is that not only do I realize that sometimes I don't know where I have met people originally, but I also realize that like I don't really know their origin stories because you don't usually sit there with people, even people that you build long relationships with, like, hey, how did you get started? Like, I don't even know your background story. Like, I don't know how you and Wayne connected initially. How did you get involved in 76 Capital? So I'm like interested in hearing that kind of story.
I'm smiling and laughing because when I asked my wife Lauren, I'm like, when people ask you what I do, like, what do you tell them? And her answer is the best, and it's so funny. And because we do have our hands across a couple of different things, and it's really funny to hear my wife describe kind of what I do. And I don't think anyone really truly knows.
Can we start from that? Like, so how does she describe it?
We got to bring in a guest. We got to bring in a guest appearance, so we'll put her on the spot.
That would be great.
I think it would be good to go back, right? If that's where you want to go from. But
yeah, let's go back.
Sure.
I've everything that I've accomplished, all my success, anything that I've been able to achieve is literally from my network, and I can connect it all. And the one thing I'll never forget is either you dubbed yourself or someone did, but calling you Spider Woman. And I thought it was the best nickname of all time. And I think it is. It's the value of the web. It's the value of the connections. It's finding a way to keep everything connected and to build it out and to make introductions, right? And not expect something in return. But at the end of the day, that's what strengthens those ties. And I think it's probably what the three of us have built our careers on. And for me, that is the reason I'm sitting here today is I initially worked in professional sports. I worked for the Philadelphia Flyers. I worked for the Philadelphia 76ers and Comcast Spectacor when they owned the teams and a bunch of properties and a bunch of different aspects to the portfolio. Amazing place to start, unbelievable connections. And I was that young kind of 22, 23, 24-year-old that was talking to everyone, meeting everyone. I didn't care if they were in the C-suite or like the janitor. I just wanted, you were in the building. I was so excited to be around you. And I was just trying to figure out everyone's story and how it tied in and how I could be helpful. Because to me, the more you could help others, the more you could solve someone's problems and issues and take something off their plate. That's how they were going to remember you. But it was back then that I initially got connected into Wayne and his tie-ins to the Philly scene. He even put a group together at one point. Most people don't even know this. He even put a group together at one point to buy the 76ers before the current ownership group. Obviously, it didn't happen. But he's always been passionate, not just passionate about sports, but he's always been on the business side of the industry as well. And so almost back to 2005, 6, 7, I got connected into Wayne and his team at 76. But it wasn't until 2012 that we actually started working together. So long story short, rubbing elbows, it's truly about the connections and strengthening your relationships. And I think that's really what's powerful here.
Do you remember how you were?
Oh, I'm sorry, Karin. I'm just curious. What were you doing at 24, 25 when you said you were working with Comcast Spectacor, Flyers, Sixers? Because that must have been pretty exciting to be that age and to be kind of in that mix.
He's making friends with the janitors.
It was. I mean,
he was really excited.
the teams weren't so great back then. The Sixers were coming off that Iverson 01 finals run, and AI was finishing up his time in Philly, and Iguodala and the Flash. So actually, all of the NHL was on strike when I started interning.
Post lockout.
Yeah, when I started interning for the Sixers, there was no hockey. And right time, right place. The Flyers came off of strike in 2005, and they were hiring up. And literally, so it was very fortunate because it was one company. All the Flyer staff walked over to the other side of the building, was helping the Sixers out instead of laying people off. So it was like an incredible move by the ownership group, by Mr. Snyder, by Comcast. And then hockey came back, and literally a sea of people walked across the building and started working for the Flyers because it was back on. And needless to say, they needed people. They staffed up. Right time, right place. I was coming off my internship with the Sixers. And so it was one of those. I was young and hustling, and they said, we have an opportunity here if you can sell. And I said, let's go. And I sold everything from tickets, suites, families. I got promoted, and then I was able to sell everything in and around the building. We got to do ad sales. I mean, I literally was anything business development, anything on the revenue side. And for me, I loved it. It was such a hustle role, again, such an area to connect and network. And I got to have my hands in everything from the concerts to the family shows to the sports teams. It was a blast. And then a few years later, I said, I need to figure out this whole innovation and entrepreneurship space. And I kind of just said now or never, and off I went. Obviously, there's probably a little more to that story.
Well, yeah, I'm curious about what triggered your curiosity there. Do you remember?
Definitely, no doubt. I went to undergrad at James Madison University. My junior year, we had a semester-long program. You basically you had classes, but also your fifth class, if you will, was you and a group of 4 or 5 others had to have a startup. You had to do a company. You had to soup to nuts do everything, right? Like a lot of us have had these experiences in college or outside. And it was by far the most impactful part of college. It was the thing I enjoyed the most. I had an interesting group. I mean, we definitely got along, and at times we didn't get along, but it was very practical, very hands-on. And it was the thing about school that I walked out of there saying, I learned the most there. I enjoyed that the most. That was the part of college that I liked, besides all the, non-classroom stuff. I had a good time
Everything
outside. Yeah, everything non. And for me, I was always playing sports, like big athlete, involved in sports. It's been a passion of my life the entire way through. And so I was fortunate that I got to start there and again, have amazing connections and relationships. But it was that time I wasn't married yet. I was engaged. I didn't have any kids. And I just said, the thing that I want to figure out in business and ultimately where I see myself is around the innovation scene. And I wasn't sure if that was startups, if that was running something myself, if it was working kind of in like a franchise role, if you will. But off I went. And the first opportunity was kind of someone I consider my aunt. She's like my mom's second cousin, but she had been with Allstate for 30 plus years. And it was really her idea that she was going to allow me to come in, show me the ropes. And ultimately, if it was successful, I could have my own agency. And so that was kind of the impetus for leaving sports to try to figure out something to do on my own. Now, it didn't work out that well in the sense of I liked what the opportunity was, but I knew ultimately it wasn't for me. But after a few years, I did everything during that time to looking on the side to buying companies, start companies. And I think the biggest jump off point about 4 or 5 years in was a legit startup. The founder and I got in contact. It ironically was a sports company in the sports space and brought me in. I was kind of the number 2 with the company. And that really, to me, was everything that I wanted and a big opportunity of the unknown. And I really learned firsthand what it was like to be inside a startup, you know, kind of what everyone imagines, good, bad, or other. You're working 24/7. You're traveling like a maniac. If you make a decision, it's from the top down. And I loved everything about it. And there were parts that I really disliked, of course. But that to me was the ultimate jump off for getting into the innovation space and then ultimately staying. And for me, I just ended up on kind of the other side of the table. But I've always been able to relate with the founders that we're investing in.
What did you consider innovation space? Because that terminology, I feel like context matters, right? So you're saying
Yep.
business innovation. So what were you seeing, like kind of pushing ideas forward, or is it ways of making revenue that you were kind of interested in, like just new and innovative ways that maybe related to the tech scene or, you know, something that was up and coming?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, it was the area and the usage of technology, kind of pushing what was next in and around. And really, that's why I describe being around the entrepreneurial space as well, doing something that hasn't been done, finding something that needs to be done better. And when I say kind of that true startup, I just equate that to the companies now that we're investing in, where there's a massive opportunity. The founders are solving a problem and they're going from scratch. And that to me was really what I ultimately took to, and the space that I finally saw myself and found myself working in, where I felt like it was quote unquote home for me.
That's awesome.
And I really haven't looked back since 2011.
Did you see signs of that type of mentality earlier in your life? Because you said you were an athlete, you know, you were kind of just, it seemed to me like you were the type of person that kind of whatever it is you were getting wrapped up into, you were kind of, it's like a little bit of that winning mentality. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to destroy this thing that I'm doing.
Yep.
Did you see anything with innovation though, when you were younger? Is it something that you found as you got older?
Yeah, no doubt. I think what we're doing on the investment side, but working with the entrepreneurs, working in innovation, I think it's the closest thing to sports. And we're fortunate we get to work with a lot of athletes today. And I think from their side, you'll hear that as well. It's probably the closest thing that you can have and the closest comp you can have to sports, of being able to win and to lose. A lot of the lessons in sports of being persistent, hustle, hard work, of course, luck comes into play here. You can have a lot of the same traits and characteristics that you'll find in startups, in entrepreneurs, that make them successful or unsuccessful. Of course, a lot of this is timing, so on and so forth. There's external factors, and every athlete will say that too. Every athlete talks about a big break or something that went right, or a setback, an injury, and how they persisted through it. And the parallels are incredible from startups to sports and athletes. And that's why it's so beautiful when we get to bring an athlete and an entrepreneur together and they realize they're speaking the exact same language.
Interesting.
And it's cool because usually the entrepreneur is kind of freaking out because they're sitting across the table from fill in the blank. But the coolest part is the athletes usually freaking out because they're sitting across the table from fill in the entrepreneur. Like, how did you do that? That's so amazing. And it's just a really cool dynamic when that comes. And for me, it really is like, that's the part that I feel like I've never stopped playing sports, even though I've gotten into the business world, because it is a lot of the same, just constantly going, constantly focused on making it happen. And I think for me, it's never really been about the dollar. I think so many people, when you talk about venture and private equity, it's just all about the dollar. And it's, yeah, of course, like the dollar matters, but it's more about kind of the winning and losing that really drives me.
Absolutely. Karin, I don't mean to hog the conversation, but it does remind me.
No, it's okay. You have good questions. I already know that. So
well, it aligns with kind of so on the side, outside of this podcast, I have a podcast called Always Level Up. I also have a brand called Flyers Nitty Gritty. It's something my partner and I do. It's a media brand. We have a NHL rights with the Philadelphia Flyers, so we actually like cover them. We have credentials. We have writers that we send there. And what I do kind of on the side to try to branch out, I create a podcast called Always Level Up. The idea there is to interview athletes and to show kind of their mindset overall, because it's something like what you were just saying is something I suspected prior to that. Somebody who actually you work with, John Fazio, somebody I grew up with as well. He was a D1 athlete, soccer player.
Yep.
And I had him on an episode as well. And I interview a lot of these athletes like Riley Cote, if you know who that is, who played for the Flyers,
Sure.
right? So he has Body Check Wellness. One of the things that I noticed just talking to him is, you see that the athlete's mindset, like exactly what you were saying, that ability to win, the ability to pivot, right? Like I was even talking to Cote, I pointed it out to him, right? This is a guy who by skill measurement probably wasn't good enough to make the NHL. And I think he would even agree with that. But he found a way to take what he had and pivot his game to be a fighter. Like he's not built today the way he was when he was playing NHL. He was like lifting all the heavy weights. Today, he's like a pretty lean guy. So he literally transformed his body to be like, I'm going to fit that need, that role, that specific role. So I find it really interesting what you're saying, because I do find that there is a large correlation between the athletic mindset and the entrepreneurial mindset. And it's like that ability. I think it's really the growth mentality as well, as like the ability that you can see yourself in a position and that you're not like, oh, this is what I am, or this is my max potential. You're kind of like, well, how can I squeeze a little bit more out of that? When you talk to athletes, you notice that as well, where they kind of have this thing, because a lot of them probably end their playing career relatively early, but it's still like in their 30s or maybe early 40s, right? And then they're ready for another career. They're not done living. So do you see that they kind of have this, sky's the limit kind of mentality?
I do. So actually, I want to go back on a point. And I think the part that I truly love about this stage, so we'll invest at 76 Capital, we'll be the first capital in. We're happy to be along with the founders. Let's go. That's actually what happened with us and Nerd Street and John, right? John, us, and one other angel we brought in. We were the first money into the company, other than anything that he and his founders put in. And they had gotten it going years before, but we were that first check in. And the coolest part about that, and I think the big disservice that's done across business and life, is people get so pigeonholed. And I understand that. I mean, when you're a startup, it's a Swiss Army knife, right? You wear a lot of hats. You need to be able to do this. You need to take out the trash and at the same time code. And then as the company grows and you get more corporate, it's like, this person needs to do this job and it's very finite and they need to just focus here. And I think it's a disservice to all of us that we're all talented. We're all multifaceted, especially now with the ease of technology. And I mean, I don't think we should all be doing open heart surgery, but there's a lot that can be Googled and that can be figured out. And there's a lot of different skill sets. And then to say someone's only good at accounting or marketing is just not fair to all of us. And so I think the part that I love about entrepreneurship is seeing people do so many different things and really seeing them But yes, a company needs to grow and you need to start focusing on certain areas. But I always question, unfortunately, how people get pigeonholed or companies are always pigeonholing people when we're all very talented and can go across. And that's, I think, one of the silver linings of the pandemic is it's allowed us to broaden out and to talk to others and talk to people in different areas and to really make connections that probably wouldn't have happened had it not been for the pandemic. So as horrible as the last 18 to 24 months have been, I think there are some silver linings to the different way we're all going to move forward here. The second part of what you were talking about, to kind of pivot the conversation, I think the one part about working with athletes and the part that we're constantly always moving on and the conversation always goes is professional athletes very rarely lost in their life. So, and what I mean by that is when they were in high school, they were the best athlete in the state. When they were in college, they were on all conference teams. They were making playoffs, right? Very rarely did they lose. And then they became a professional athlete. And yes, while Riley, had to figure it out, how to play in the NHL and how to get there and how to continue to improve, he had a skill level that was above and beyond
1%.
And so while all these athletes aren't 1% of the pros, they're on at the end of the pendulum of unbelievably talented and gifted. And then it comes down to hard work, hustle, smart. When that translates into business, there's a learning curve of realizing you can't keep throwing money into something. You can't just keep going after these startups. Some of these companies, unfortunately, just the overall percentages of how this works, some of these companies are just not going to make it. And there's a plethora of factors. And sometimes it's completely out of the control of the company. And that's really like the education that we're going through. And it's not just athletes. Venture capitalists mess this up. We all do. We just want something to work. And sometimes you need to say, unfortunately, we need to go on to the next, or this just isn't the one. And I think that's a pretty interesting dynamic of working with people that have never really lost. And if they did, it was at the highest of level. So that's kind of been firsthand some of our experiences here.
That's really interesting. Sorry, Karin, go ahead.
No, you don't have to apologize. It's all good. I want to make sure that I'm not like taking us too off course, because I want to go back to Chad's earlier point when you were talking about the pandemic and making connections. So do you feel, because I feel like I've heard a lot of controversial thoughts around this. Like some people feel like they have gotten more connected in different ways and getting into different circles and things like that. And some people have felt more isolated. So I'm interested in like understanding what your experience was, because I think it's probably controversial compared to other people's.
I'm a positive person. I always, try to see the good in anything that is potentially a negative situation, right? I always try to take some wins out of it. My personal take on the pandemic is this has not been a good 2 years. Looking back, it's a global pandemic. The last one happened about 100 years ago. I think, unfortunately, we're going to see residual issues for here on out. We have little kids. We have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. We often are worried about, just like many others, how it's going to play out for them. Missing years of school, potentially some of them getting sick and having long-term effects. And then you have the other end of the spectrum with parents and grandparents but people of all ages, of all walks, right? And then to your point, there was and there still is a lot of isolation issues. So by no means do I think this has gone well. I think this has been really bad, but at the same time, it's affected all of us in a variety of ways. And it's just how we cope and deal with it. I think some of the positives are that there's entrepreneurial spirit to all of us. And I think it brought it out, either out of necessity or it has given people time. And even us at 76 Capital, Wayne and myself, for probably 2 years prior to the pandemic, we really had gotten into some interesting conversations and relationships. And we were kind of constantly asking ourselves, how is there another way to monetize some of the opportunities we have in front of us, in addition to our platform, which is the venture fund? That is what 76 Capital is. We we raise outside capital and bring in our own capital, and we find the startups at an early stage, and we put our capital in the ones that we want to get behind, and we do everything we possibly can to make them successful. Like at the core, that is 76 Capital. But we have these really interesting assets and parts. And so we kind of kept asking ourselves the same question: is there a way that we can also monetize? And then the pandemic hit, and we realized we had an opportunity to start what we ended up calling an advisory and consulting practice. Consulting in the areas that we're investing in. They're cutting edge, they're bleeding, they're the next. They're areas that people don't know a lot about or are curious about. And so we literally launched a startup within 76 Capital. And I think if people talk like, are you an investor or a founder? I think we're more founders than investors. Like if you had to make us pick black and white, I'd say we're founders and entrepreneurs more than we are investors. So we're investors with the founder's hat on. And so the idea for us to get to start something during a pandemic just seemed natural. And some of the earliest things we did was we called all of our companies. We made sure they were going to be in the best place possible. And we were in constant communication, just trying to make sure the founder and teams were doing well, the companies were as healthy as possible. And then we called all the other investors that we're friends with, and we said, what are you doing no one knew, right? The next 2 months, 6 months, 2 years. And it was split. Half of them literally were going to an island, going south, going to Florida, going off the coast. And they were going to get good Wi-Fi and they were going to spot up. And then the other half was, there's going to be a way that you can push, that you can move forward, that you can drive. And that's kind of how we're going to spend our time. And that was, the class and the group that's our MO, and that's what we fall into. So we started a company, we made more investments. There are people that are like, you can't invest during this. You're not going to be able to see people. You just cannot invest. It's not the right thing to do. And
you guys are like, let's ramp it up. We're going to start a startup inside of the company.
we had a startup going. We made investments based on companies that we already had working relationships with, and right time, right place. And some of our companies were even able to accelerate what they were doing based on the pandemic. And so, that's just, if people ask who I am, I just always try to be upbeat, positive, and try to make the best of whatever situation's presented. So I think that was kind of the pandemic for me personally, and the pandemic for us at 76 Capital. And I don't feel like we're out of it by any means. I think people have gotten really creative through it. People had the confidence to get to reach out and connect with people that they normally wouldn't have. And I think there was a societal responsibility of taking calls, of answering emails that normally would have gone to the waste bin, that normally would have gone non-answered. And so I think there was some positivity to it. But then the challenges too. I mean, you have people working from home. Some people literally were working 2 jobs. They could take on consulting outside work, if you will. They could actually have 2 jobs. People were switching companies, and so
a lot of changes.
I think it's tricky from our seat, where we're hiring and growing, and whether that's us at 76 or our portfolio companies. So long story short, I think there were some positive outcomes, but overall it was a terribly negative situation that we'll continue to iterate on globally, not just from the myopic stateside viewpoint.
Can I ask this as a follow-up? So one thing that I found about innovation in general, the source of it is usually a limitation, right? So you start off with a problem, right? So something like the pandemic obviously would create all these problems, right? You've adapted, right? You've pivoted to some degree. I'm sure you guys didn't completely overhaul your company, but you obviously come up with new ideas. And you talked about the residual problems that we probably will incur. And I think you're 100% right. And I think we're seeing some of that now. We're seeing it happening in weird ways. Do you think there's going to be any residual benefits for a company like yours, like maybe lessons learned over the past few months that you think probably better prepare you maybe 5-10 years down the line as a company, where you dealt with kind of this rough time and it kind of strengthens you, right? Like almost like Tommy John surgery, right? Where, they tear their, I forget what tendon it is in their arm and their elbow. And, they get the surgery and all of a sudden it's stronger, right? It's like one of those things where it's not something you ideally want to go through, but if you go through it the right kind of way, you can actually, come out stronger on the other end. Do you see that for 76 Capital?
I see it across. I mean, I think the cool part is it was always, we're building Philadelphia. We need to hire in the region. and we're gonna scale and grow from here. And now when you have an open position, and if your staff is mostly remote or 100% remote, why not to say you're going to find someone talented in Iowa, on the West Coast, in South America, fill in the blank. And I think the more creative people are, the more they're able to adapt and move. I think when you're a massive corporation, a Fortune 500 company, and you're paying tens or hundreds of $millions of rent, and you have just a completely vacant building because you let your staff go 100% remote, there's just internal issues of, this is ridiculous. We're paying all this rent and no one's using it. But maybe they should let the building, maybe they should try to sublet it. Maybe they should talk with the landlord and convert those into condos, but maybe they should let their staff stay remote if it's actually working. And it really is just opened up people's minds and allow people to think creatively. But like anything else, you're going to have people that are like, no, we need to go back the way we were doing it. That's what worked. And then you're going to have people that are saying like, we'll never go back. This is ridiculous. And, some people commute for an hour a day, home and back. Some people it's 2 hours or 3 hours. There's a point of that is wasted time.
Yeah.
And getting dressed and getting ready. I mean, when you can wake up and you're on
pajamas.
Yeah, you're
well, you don't have to put on pajamas. What am I
ready,
talking
right?
about? You're not like time to get started for the day. I'm gonna put my pajamas on, even though I just got out of bed. So I've been working remotely for a long time, like way before, and Yariv too, actually, before like the pandemic, like 6 years or something. I've been remote, and I, being a social butterfly as I am, where I'm like the Spider Woman of the world, and like then going into like you're working from home. At first, it was like amazing. But then I realized what I was actually missing. It's not the socializing aspect, right? Because you can create your own socialization around it. Like I'd go to the gym, I'd have happy hour with friends, whatever. But it was actually more of like the water cooler conversations that I felt like I was missing. And like, you could tell me if you can relate to this too, but like, you go over to the water cooler and you talk to somebody from the office and they're like, oh, well, this is this and this happening. And you're like, oh my God, I know somebody for this thing. That's like why I actually started my women's networking group, because I was like, we have to talk to each other. I know you relate to this too, because you've hosted these kinds of similar types of networking events for those purposes. Yeah. But I feel like that's kind of what's missing with like remote work. And I feel it like 6 years later or more, whatever, I still feel it pretty intensely that I'm like lacking this like water cooler happenstance, coincidental conversation where like your connections can actually become valuable to other people by, who knows where it comes from, right? But I feel like those things are missing.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I will never say that you can effectively 100% work remotely. You completely miss the human interaction. Without spending time with you, I know, you're like your sister. Like you need to be around people. There's an energy that you cannot replace. Obviously, I think the hardest part about all of these video calls was it got to be too much. And I think you're seeing the opposite now. I think you're seeing a lot of people that say, just call me, or I'm going to limit it to 2 a day. And that's probably a lot healthier than, we all got called on back to back. You didn't even have time to grab a drink, to go to the bathroom. And you did not want to be on video after, weeks.
Oops.
Oh, froze. Yeah, the back-to-back meetings his internet will pick up in a second, I'm sure. But yeah, those back-to-back meetings are really pretty horrible. Like actually, I'm like my meetings, I've started to cut them down where like I have windows that are just like I take meetings and then blocks.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people like they're starting to do 25-minute meetings instead of 30. You know what I mean? So you give yourself 5 minutes, like get up and walk around.
Yeah. You can actually set that on Google calendars where you can put like 25 minutes or 55 minutes and it automatically sets it as like that.
Yeah.
Like those are options it gives you, which is really nice. I guess Chad's going to come back in. So we just got cut off briefly. What we were talking about was how Zoom meetings, people are going through Zoom fatigue. And at first it was back-to-back meetings where you didn't even have a chance to take a break, to drink water. And now people are like limiting it to 2 a day or trying to eliminate it completely. The burnout is very real.
Just to cut in there real quick, because this is something So I work for Cigna healthcare company in IT, and I kind of specialize in, I guess, remote working, virtual working, and I create a tool for them that works around that and whatnot. But before the pandemic, we were actually talking to people about this, and my team and I, what we used to do was just have like these open video sessions where we just sit there and hang out on video together, like with our core team, and a lot of that energy, that awkwardness on camera kind of started going away for people. But we also talked about this with the company. There has to be a lot of forgiveness when it comes to being on camera too. So like if you are in these virtual meetings, like you should be able to just kind of get up and walk out of the room,
or do what Chad just did, where he shut his video off.
Well, no.
Let me demonstrate what this means for a lot of forgiveness. I guess you'll take the time. I'm going to go away. Oh, I just realized my company name is still on.
Yeah, I saw that earlier, but there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, whatever.
No, but it is one of those things that you have to humanize the experience to what you're saying. I was just kind of thinking about it because the back-to-back meeting, that wasn't even possible pre just all remote, right? So people couldn't give you a back-to-back. Like you did, but you always had the 5 minutes between, go to the bathroom. You always had that. And with like this idea of like the robot kind of handling everything, I think everything was like supposed to be super perfect, right? And he's available, she's available. It's almost like you have a phone, people call you, and if you don't answer, people are like, I know that phone is near you, like I know you're not, but there has to be like this forgiveness that comes with it too, where people have to humanize the experience because there's no replacing a human like the in person. It's never gonna happen. The video helps, but you never can replace it. So you have to create a new dynamic within that. Sorry, Karin.
No, there's something I want to mention, just kind of going off of your point. I think I heard this from Joel Eden, who does like UX, like product design kind of work. I think it was either him or it might have been John Gozier, maybe. But I think what he was saying was one of the issues with virtual meetings is that's not human, kind of like what we would normally get versus like an actual human interaction, and why the burnout is so much more is one part is that we have to focus on ourselves at the same time we're focusing on other people, right? Because we see the video of ourselves and we're like, well, we also have to look at ourselves at the same time we're looking at other people, which takes a lot of energy out of us, whether or not we're aware of it. And the other thing he said was that also there is like body language and small, minute details of how a person is speaking to us. And we can't necessarily pick those things up. Like when we're on video, it's almost like a Wi-Fi signal that's trying to pick up Wi-Fi and constantly circling, looking for Wi-Fi, and it's going to burn it out, right? Even because if they can't find Wi-Fi, it's not picking up the signals. So like we're not picking up the body language, which normally would come more natural to us, but our minds are looking for the body language from the other people. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Like I pay attention in meetings now when I see people's mic go unmute and then go back on mute. And I'm like, oh, did you want to say something? That's like, and people, they're like, well,
it's like the adjustment in your chair type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. The adjustment in your chair, the mute, unmute kind of thing. You're like, somebody wanted to say something and then they decided not to say it after somebody else spoke, but it's normally something that you would pick up in person, I think.
No doubt. I couldn't agree more. I mean, you cannot replace these human interactions. And, so it was really good to get kind of back out there a little, to go to a conference and try to do it obviously safely, but you miss people. You miss being around people that are friends or are going to become friends.
Chad's a social butterfly too. He really needs it.
I do.
What conference did you go to?
The big, I think, kickoff for us, just because we were in May, we went down to Bitcoin Miami, Bitcoin 2020, which was 21, but or maybe it was 21. So it was funny because we were a little bit we are trying to really figure it out in the overall NFT blockchain space. And so we learned a lot, but also we were in Miami and at a conference. And so it was probably an interesting one to get back out there for, but it went well. And so that was the first back at it.
That's amazing. I feel like it's like, when you've been like held in for so long, it's like, it kind of feels like, I actually think that's happening to people, like travel is like through the roof. It's like travel has gone up with like how it normally was year to year during Thanksgiving and Christmas. Like everyone is just traveling now because they've been locked away for so long. They're like, let me get out, so like every opportunity to do something. Like it wouldn't surprise me if like concerts and conferences attendance start really shooting through the roof, and like, booked hotels and all that kind of stuff just continue to increase more than what they did beforehand. I mean, I didn't
no
stop
doubt. I mean,
traveling
it's gonna drive the experience economy. And again, I mean, we're always looking for what's next or what's the next investment opportunity. And I think there's going to be a lot of innovation around really, you need to give people what they want. You need to meet the fan and the consumer, where before it was kind of pushing. You were constantly telling the fan and the consumer, this is how you listen, this is how you watch, this is how you intake, this is where you go. And now it's kind of the fans' turn to say, this is what I want. And there's going to be a lot of discretionary income in this space. And so the product has to be incredible because the competition is ramping up. There's going to be more to see, more to do. And so you need to kind of give the fan more of what they're interested in, more in what they want. And so for us, that just, screams innovation and disruption. And we're really excited about that aspect of it.
Yeah,
I have a question.
Tech
Go ahead,
scene.
Yariv.
I'm sorry, but that's the tech scene in a nutshell. And I feel like kind of what you're saying there is that tech has now affected, like events, right? More than ever, right? Because now we have the option of doing things remote. It's like, you have all these options, right? And you're getting used to not going, right? You're getting used to sitting at home and watching on TV, where before you had to be there. So now it's like you have to incentivize people. So you're almost like reversing the mentality that you used to have, right? Because with all tech, it's usually pretty competitive, but the mindset typically is, well, what is it that the end user wants, right? You're always trying to solve what the end user wants. I think you're right. I think before it was just, this is what we have, show up and go at it. And now it's, well, what does the end user want? What do our customers want?
I mean, it's cool. I mean, one of our portfolio companies, Maestro out of LA, Maestro Interactive, they started doing virtual concerts during the pandemic. They worked with Billie Eilish. They're right now doing one for Lady Gaga. I mean, some of your top global artists. And I think before the pandemic, the idea of saying, give us $20 and we're going to have an amazing virtual concert, the fans would have been like, no way, that's ridiculous. But the scale of that, right? Charging someone $9.99, $29.99 for a virtual concert, plus being able to do it in person. And then the other side of that coin is the people that are attending in person. Why are they missing $20 of the show, of the 20 minutes of the show, of the game, to go get food, to wait in line for something, to ask a question, right? It's the opportunity for technology to disrupt the experience that I shouldn't have to leave my seat unless I choose to. And so again, it just screams opportunity. And I think the experience for the fans is going to look very different moving forward.
I want to touch on something real quick on what you said. I think it's very interesting. And I think there's a lot of element of the scalable nature of the remote, concerts or, the virtual concerts, that you can get to a lot more people at once. And one thing I worked for Comcast for a while, and I was working on the innovation team in Comcast Interactive Media. And one of the things we were working on was virtual reality. I still believe in virtual reality quite a bit. But, the conversations we were having, everybody kind of wanted to do like these experience things, or like these games. And I'm like, okay, it's an experience machine. And I was like, I feel like a lot of this stuff is going to make up, and not just virtual reality, I mean, just these virtual experiences. I wish I could have been there, but I couldn't been there. So this is my opportunity to be there, right? Like I can't go see, a band in Germany, right? But now that virtual experience is going to be a lot more high end, right? So you're going to have an ability to have a better experience because they're tailoring to that now, that I feel like that market will grow. And a lot of people, like one of the things I said for virtual reality in particular was, I can't see my friend. He lives in Denver, Colorado or Los Angeles now. But if I put on my virtual headset, we can throw a ball and have a conversation together, right? It's like, I wish we could have been together, but you can't, right? Or this is something very popular amongst fish heads. I personally am not big into fish, but I have a lot of friends who are very into fish. People travel around the country to go see them, but if they can't go to that show, they watch the live show. They call it a couch tour. They'll sit in somebody's house, they'll put the live performance on, and they'll pretend like they're there. And I really think that there's a lot to that. And I think you're hitting on a really strong point that as that concept grows, where they all of a sudden they start tailoring to a virtual experience, you can probably come up with some really cool solutions that maybe the virtual experience, one, I don't think it'll ever be better, like we were saying. Like, I don't think it's ever going to replace it. But I think you could come up with new and innovative ideas to come up with a really great virtual experience. Like, as somebody who loves the Flyers, like, I go and I cover Flyers games. I enjoy watching them at home just as much as watching them in person. That might bother some people, but I love just the convenience of sitting, not the 20 minutes in between. Like, that's a big thing for me. So do you find?
I want to just add one thought to that beforehand. So one of the things that makes me think about is, like, it's not necessarily that you need to replace live entertainment or live concerts, because in some cases you can create a different type of experience of something that you wouldn't normally be able to give.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
People. So, like, I don't know. Yeah. So that's kind of what I think about.
No, I think you summarized what I was saying better than I did. I think I long-winded what you just said, which is, there's a lot, like, an NHL game, you can fill the stadium with 20,000 people. Okay. But if the virtual experience all of a sudden starts becoming better, then, you can't fit more than 20,000 people in a stadium anyway. You're maxed out.
Yeah.
A football team, whatever. But
there's also, like, bubbles of, like, you could see what other people are talking about far away from you. Oh, Chad's leaving us again.
I don't think
like,
so.
Bye. No,
I think he's just making adjustments.
Okay.
Anyway.
But yeah.
No, Chad, I'm good.
Your thoughts?
No, I mean, that really touched on a lot of what we're investing in. We're investing in we just invested this year in an augmented reality company with a sports focus first and foremost.
Makes sense.
So obviously, virtual reality, augmented reality, they're touching on a lot of the same ideas, and it is being able to enhance the experiences that they want to have and the types of experiences that they think they want to have. And we're just getting going. It's going to be so different 5 years out, 10 years out. Not even talking about a big part of what we're investing in, which is the sports betting side and just changing topics. But again, it's the idea of bringing people in closer and really, when done responsibly, it makes you even more passionate about something that you're already going to be consuming and it's going to be part of your entertainment.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I know obviously you mentioned Nerd Street Gamers, right? So esports. I mean, you go back 10 years and you tell people that esports was going to be what it is today. Most people will probably laugh at you to some degree.
Definitely.
Probably talk down on it. I never for once thought it was not going to be what it is today. Because I'm a video game nerd, always been one. And I believe in the medium, but something like esports, right? Like, that is, you compare esports to, like, other sports. And I talked to John Fazio about this, so I want to give him credit because we talked about this on my interview. When you talk about physical sports, there's a limitation of the body, right? With esports, there is no limitation of the body. You can be a 5'2" guy and you can be the best athlete in esports, or a girl, or, you can be overweight. The audience of people who can relate to an esports game is much larger than that of like an athlete, right? Because a lot of people who are like, so all of a sudden, I feel like this kind of correlates where, like, this virtual playing field is just, there's so much opportunity. It's like a whole new universe in a way, and, like, this is like a whole new playground in a way. And, like, I refer to virtual reality as a window into the virtual dimension, right? Because it's like you're entering this world that exists out there that we really didn't have perspective on. So it's like all these esports things. Do you see that now happening? And especially probably for betting as well, right? Where it used to be in the casino, right? And now I don't know the numbers, but I would bet sports betting on the internet has probably surpassed the amount of people that go into casinos, or at least competes with it. Do you see that happening as well?
Oh, without a doubt. I think it brings back to my point of kind of how we get pigeonholed from a work environment of this person's really good at X and this is what they should work on. I think it's, the idea that you can be a quote unquote traditional athlete, but then you go and play video games and compete there. We're all multifaceted. We all have different aspects to us. We all like to learn. We like to engage. We like to take on challenges. We like to figure things out. We like to try things. And that's all opportunistic. And it comes together. And in our world, specifically at 76 Capital, whether that's video gaming, traditional sports, the blend across. I mean, the coolest thing is when you see, the music artist playing a live concert inside a video game, and that same fan, right? They like sports, they like music, they like video games. Why not blend it together? And you're seeing that some of your top streamers are athletes. Some of your top streamers are working with athletes. And that's just the realization of what really, I mean, this generation, the next generation, but there is, 1/3 of the world games. So when people say, this isn't going to last or this needs to go away, and China's really come down with laws that are trying to restrict, and like it's like anything. You can gamble too much, you can drink too much, you can video game too much, you can do too much homework. Probably doing too much homework is not going to be, but there's just a point of there's just a point of excess, right? And so I think it's beautiful that people are gaming and playing traditional sports, and it's all coming together because it opens up where John Fazio always talks about being a star soccer player, being, a video gamer, being on the chess team. I mean, he had friends that were across everything that would never associate, and now they're all coming together, and that's a great thing. That's what our society needs. And so I can go on about some of the positives around some of the areas we're fortunate to get to invest in.
So what do you see for just to focus on you a little bit, what do you see for yourself as one of the things that you're purely do you have a vision for yourself over the next 5-10 years, I guess, separate from your brand and your company? Is there some position you see yourself in, and I guess the entrepreneurial space or even just social space? You said you're social butterfly.
I think
that's a really good question.
I never get the saying right, so I try not to say it. But when you're in your 20s or early 30s, you care about what everyone thinks.
Yeah.
And then you get into your 40s and 50s, and you start to give an F about what people think.
And then your 60s, you realize nobody cared about what you.
Nobody cares at all. Right?
Yeah.
And I turned 41 over the weekend actually, and I kind of
got happy birthday.
So thank you. I try not to do a cheesy shout out, but I got to that point. And it might have been because of the pandemic or where it was coming anyway. And it was kind of, I'm personally having a blast that on the work front, we're able to really push boundaries, and I love it. We talked about that. I mean, I love the excitement and the drive that I get from work, but also, having little ones and responsibility and a family, and that, it's a blast. I enjoy coaching. I'm not doing it because someone said you need to go coach soccer, you need to go coach basketball. So for me personally and selfishly, it's a blast right now. And a lot of it is because you stop worrying about what others think or what others kind of want you to do or expect, and you just go and live and enjoy it. And maybe that's the pandemic too, of you realize that things can be, part of this can be taken away from you, that you can't just go out in society. You can't just have a meal and a drink when you want, how you choose. And hopefully we don't have to go kind of back through that again. But I don't know. I'm having a hell of a time out there right now, and who knows?
Good answer. And to that point, I mean, my sister, my mom are still in Israel, and I was the first one to go. So as soon as it was taken away from us, because we couldn't travel, right? We couldn't go to the country. The three of us were just we're going to Israel, immediately, to your point. Yeah. Well,
Yariv was here for almost 3 months. I've been here it's going to be 2 months, but I just extended my stay for another 4 weeks. No, 4 months, 3 months.
3 months.
Something. A while. I'm probably rocking out here through the winter.
It's not a bad idea. So Karin, you usually have a good question for people at the end. Do you remember what that question is, or do I have to remind you?
You can remind me. You can ask
Okay.
I think I know what it is, but it's so kind of similar to like, how did we meet question, where I'm like, I probably know what it is, but it might be wrong.
Yeah, it's like you think. No, her question typically is, which I think is a good one. It's kind of generic, but it's a good question. If you in your current position, if you could say anything to the younger version of you, or people who are younger, or at least coming along in their career, what kind of advice would you give them? What kind of guidance would you give yourself, even knowing what you know today, like through everything you've been through?
And it can't be like invest in Bitcoin.
Yeah. No, it used to be invest in Microsoft, Apple.
In Bitcoin, yeah. No doubt. I mean, I really try to there's a reason your rear view is very small and your dashboard's massive. I mean, I really try not to second guess anything I did. Obviously,
it's great.
There's a lot.
That's a great line.
There's a lot that you could have done differently. There's a lot but I don't think it's healthy to kind of second guess. And I'm not saying this because of the name of the show or because it's really what we've talked about, but I don't think you can network enough. I don't think you can build strong enough relationships. I mean, there's a lot of people that want to go a mile wide and an inch deep, and why not go a mile wide and a mile deep? I really, there's people I could have strengthened relationship with. There's people I could have, you just don't know in that sense. And I think as you have kids and you realize, I mean, you can scroll Instagram, Twitter till you're blue in the face, but you're sitting there on social media and you have your son or your daughter right next to your spouse, and you're like, what the F am I doing? Right. And so I think there's a lot of just here and now. And I was it wasn't until I was out of school that social media was even a thing. So I fortunately got to go through college without having to worry about every post, every photo, every video. There's a lot of healthy aspects to social media, but I think there's obviously, we all know it, there's incredibly unhealthy parts to social media. And it's also an age thing and a responsibility thing. And unfortunately, like everything, I think people are using it at an early age. And so I think constantly what I'm trying to teach myself and talk to myself about is be present, and whatever I see on Instagram is not going to matter compared to what I could be doing, with my son or daughter or something. So I think that's a lesson I'm constantly trying to work currently on. But I think you can look back and say that too.
I really like what you're saying, but I want to add a thought, because I had this kind of thought about this morning. Cause okay, so I'm in Israel now. And one of the things about being in Israel is like, I feel like I'm a little bit disconnected from like the world that I was like connecting with, right? I'm like a little out of touch. And I was thinking, I was like, all right, well, social media, I was listening to that 5 a.m. club book, kind of, as I was listening to that audio book about the 5 a.m. club. And one of the things they talk about is like, you could be doing other things instead of browsing through social media. But there's a part of me that's also like, well, browsing through social media is also in a way networking and like a digital space too. And like, for putting so much emphasis on networking, and then being able to like say, well, I don't really need to be browsing social media, even though that's kind of an element of its own. I'm interested to see if you have any thoughts about that.
No, I think there's a lot of good parts of social media too. I'm not saying all social media is bad or don't use it or it's the devil's creation, right? I just, it's how and when you use it. I definitely, it has helped me in so many business situations, and you got to throw like LinkedIn there, right? Like that's definitely a professional.
Definitely.
Like, so it has helped me immensely, but I think I'm trying to be completely cognizant of how and when and why I'm using it.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
But it is also, at the end of the day, it's created, we all need now a digital footprint, including our in-person and physical. And so some of us live two different lives, and sometimes they're completely not connected. And that part's a little insane to me. So we'll never figure this out. There will always be positives. There will always be negatives to this. It's what we have. there will continue to be new platforms and new ways to engage. And I like how you said that. I mean, it's stuff. There's a lot of value to social media too, but I'm just trying to be present more.
Yeah, no,
That makes a lot of sense.
oh, sorry, Colleen. I think that was a great answer though. What you had, and I think she definitely makes a point. But it was kind of like the joke that you made about homework earlier. Like I was kind of thinking about that. I was like, well, there is kind of a downside to homework too. Like for instance, I'll just use an example from a movie, right? Like Girl Next Door, which is a pretty popular movie, right? He was, young, good-looking guy, and he graduated top of his class. He was president of the class. And then as he was graduating, he realized that I didn't have any fun. He's like, I didn't have fun. Right. So all of a sudden he kind of rejected the path that he was going on. And I think it's really I think you kind of nailed it though. I think it's really about a balance. Like I didn't do enough homework in school. Okay. And I think you're supposed to do homework in school. You're supposed to do well in school because it speeds things up. It's, it just makes things easier. It opens up more doors. Right. But at the same time, like Colleen's skill, right, and your skill, right, of networking, that has nothing to do with school. Like maybe you can learn it at school, but that's just making friends. And you see a lot of times in life that people who maybe they didn't do the best in school, maybe they were average students in school, but then they get out of school and then they excel because the things they put their energy towards are the things that now are more relevant in the world. And I think a lot of it is, to your point, that in-person presence. Can't just do that, right? You can't just be a party person, right? So there's just that balance, I think. And like social media it's a tool, right? But you have to use it like exactly what you were saying, right? You have to know when to use it. It's got to be more precise and measured, right? Like when you're just sitting there on the couch, kind of just like I'm bored, right? Scrolling, that's probably a bad use of time. But if you're on there deliberately, like looking, okay, well, what's going on today? Who am I going to message? Right. Let me share that. Like, I feel like that's where it goes right.
It's intentional.
Yeah, intentional is the word. Thank you. So I think your answer was great, and I love that quote that you had. With
the rear so tough,
is smaller than your dashboard. I'm going to steal that one.
Dashboard is massive,
I think that's a Pat Croce, and I think that's right. So we'll say thank you, Pat Croce.
Yeah, credit to him. It's a great quote. I love that.
Yeah. And also, if you're looking behind you, you're going to end up tripping over a log or something because you're not paying attention.
I think that's the second part of his quote. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
That's a Karin quote.
Thank you, Pat Croce.
This is a Karin quote based off of real experiences. If you're looking behind you, you're going to definitely trip on a log.
Yeah. There you go.
So, all right. Cool. Chad, thank you so much for taking the time. I know we rescheduled this like a million times.
And sorry about that. Yeah.
No, it was me too, and it was such a pleasure and so good to see you and Yariv get to spend some time here, and I hope we get to do it again. But I look forward to that in-person drink and catch up, and be safe over there, and we'll do our best over here in Philly.
All right, cool. Thank you so much. And for all the viewers, like, comment, subscribe.
Yeah, there you go. You got it. I was waiting for it.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, now since I've already done it and we've ended it, then now I can just make it awkward at the end.
The end. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.